But okay, I'll try to keep this brief so we can get to the discussion. Basically, the structure of the budget has not changed from previous years. Any changes that have been made are just to accommodate money that wasn't spent in specific areas. But one notable change that has been made, and it's not so much a change, more of like an accommodation, is that we have a large rollover from last year just due to accumulation of past year's rollover. And in order to sort of balance that out, one update is that instead of doing the annual class of whatever graduating year the incoming classes t-shirt sale, we're doing one sort of like a campus-wide spirit shirt, so it's more Rice University focused and not exclusive of other graduating classes. And it's also a way to sort of market the SA to various groups on campus. Instead of selling these shirts, we will just buy the shirts from SA funds, like the rollover funds, and give them out as incentive to come to SA events and various on-campus activities. Another update is to, rather than, okay, so every committee that is under the SA gets an allotted fund. So this year, on top of that allotted fund, we'll also have sort of this pool that you can apply to draw extra financial support from. So say you're allotted $100 as a committee. If you plan on doing something that will help your team more and you need more than $100, you can apply for that extra money because we have it. So those are the major changes. Did you have a question? Cool. So, also, another thing is that recently over the summer, SA and GSA shared office, and we've had to move offices. So there are several expenses that come with that are really not costs that we can look over because we have to do it together with GSA, and we kind of have to compromise on what we can pay for and what we can't pay for. So on top of that, rollover will pay for that as well. But this is not an annual expense, it's just a one-time thing since we're moving offices.
How much?
For the office supplies and renovation, it will be approximately $3,000 to $4,000.
Did your office come with internet?
I mean, I hope so.
Wait, you don't know yet?
Our office in the RMC Cloisters.
The new office, yeah.
It was
I mean,
built
it-
for
Yeah. I mean, it's on, yes. Sorry, I don't understand your question.
If there's issues with everything.
Well, it's on Rice University campus, so it should be Wi-Fi accessible.
And we were in the closure today.
Yeah, so we just moved down Cloisters. Are we good? Cool. We'll bring this back up in 2 weeks to vote on it. It needs to be approved by Senate by 2/3 vote. So if you have any questions about it, direct it to me. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
great, and so Joan will be sending out a copy of that on the listserv email for everyone. Actually, not on the listserv email, but just to voting members of Senate. Actually, it'll be on the listserv email. Sorry. She'll be sending that out for everyone to kind of take a look at. If you have any thoughts, please do feel free to contact Joan. We are really lucky to have a new office space. It's really nice. It's huge. Once we actually put furniture in it, please come by and check it out. I don't know how we ended up with it because it's probably the nicest office in the Cloisters, so that's awesome. Next up, we have Nitin and Molly introducing legislation on EMS on-campus housing. This kind of stems out off of really extensive discussions we've had over the last term, and so I'm assuming this is going to be relatively straightforward. But and Molly. You guys can start.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm the Rising EMS captain and the highest student ranking member of EMS.
And I'm Nathan. I'm the Baker senator. So
so while we wait for it to come on, basically the legislature is the same as last year. It's the same as last year in terms of why we're introducing it. The major difference is the rotation system has been completely taken off. So now all ICs and slash ICTs are guaranteed housing at their respective colleges. These ICs slash ICTs must be notified to the respective colleges by February 1st. If an IC or ICT is chosen after February 1st, they are put first on the wait list for their respective college. And then the third thing is, if an IC or ICT drops before June 1st, the housing, if they got it through this policy, is lost, and the college can do what they want with it. So that's the major thing. There was nothing else that we changed. Everything else is the same for this part. Are there any questions on that? Yes.
I guess I don't understand the June 1st thing. Like, what?
Why did we
do you mean
choose
by
that? It was early enough for the colleges to then contact other people, like who are off campus, because sometimes they're getting apartments, and it's late enough to know if an IC or slash ICT is really going to go through the program or not.
So like, even if like they went through our room draw and they got a room and then they dropped out of the program,
They would still have the housing. So Nathan actually brought this up, which was a good point. In the legislation, it says through the aforementioned policy. So if they got it through some other method, like maybe they were some type of position in cabinet at the college, or they got it through room draw, they would not lose it. They only lose it if they got it through this legislation.
okay.
Yeah.
Is this going to apply to every in charge at every college? So if the college is multiple in charges, it covers all of them?
Yeah, that's the discussion we had last Senate, and we decided that it'd be best just to put them all, wherever college they are, it'd be easier for the college and easier for the IC. Any other questions or comments or concerns? Cool. Oh, yeah, cool. Thank you.
Alright, so that is there. Everyone has it in the emails. We'll be voting on that in 2 weeks. It would probably be pertinent to kind of talk about that at the colleges. Think about, does this work for each individual college, and is this something you are okay with implementing moving forward? So next up, and this is kind of the last agenda item. It's probably going to take up the rest of our meeting, but it's a discussion with the sexual assault working group. So over the summer, there's been a group of administrators, faculty, staff, and Megan, the student and graduate student representatives on this committee to look at Rice's sexual assault policies and other things around our sexual assault programming across campus. And so this is kind of a chance for them to present what has been worked on, some upcoming changes, and really to start off a healthy and kind of productive conversation between students and the administration. Obviously, this is an incredibly important kind of issue and problem, not just facing Rice, but facing campuses nationwide. And so hopefully this will be a good kind of start to an ongoing discussion. So I guess Megan and Dr. Taylor, Dr. Taylor is the chair of the committee. They'll be kind of going through some of the things they've been working on with the PowerPoint slide. We'll also have a anonymous questions thing that you can text. And so text into this thing, nobody knows who you are. And so I actually don't know how this works, but I think if you text 642499 plus your message to 22333, like the same thing you text your attendance to, it shows up on the screen. And then Dr. Taylor and Megan will have the chance to answer it. But again, that number is 22333 is the number you text it to, and then you text 642499 plus your message will pop up here anonymous.
Should we run one?
Oh, it works. We ran that whole meeting, but you're more than welcome to send a test as well. But with that being said, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Taylor and Megan. So it's the number you text it to is 22333, and you text 642499. Sorry, 642499 plus your message.
I'm going to try to talk without the microphone, so tell me if you can't hear me. unlike Dean Hutch, I do not project to the back of the room, but I'll do my best. So once again, I'm Matt Taylor. I'm Associate Dean of Undergraduates. I'm also Associate Provost for Academic Affairs. I just completed my 20th year at Rice. It's shocking. A lot of that was in graduate school, but it actually counted towards my 20-year total, which means that I now qualify for one of those plaques that goes in front of a tree. So my life is complete. But so I'm here as chair of this working group that was appointed by the president. I want to point out that while I'm associate dean, my role in the dean's office, I don't have formal responsibility for SJP, the counseling center, police. The only direct responsibility I have for some of the things we'll talk about tonight is our health services. The doctors report to me. My role with Hutch is to really advise him on university-wide policies and procedures, be a sounding board for him. And I also oversee everything that's in the CCL, Center for Civic Leadership. I'll let Megan tell you who she is. You know who she is, but I'll let her tell you.
Yeah, I'm the president. Love it. I'm Megan. I'm an RHA also. So I'm on the working group as basically the undergraduate representative. So the working group has met already, but it's also continuing to meet over. It's really, the end point is not really decided upon yet. Definitely through September and October probably, if not longer. However long it takes to kind of get where we want to be with this policy. So nothing really that we're going to talk about is a done deal, and that's something that I wanted to kind of start with. And also, I'm the undergraduate representative. It's not just me on the committee, like, or I don't want it to be. So I'm going to try to meet with as many people as are interested in meeting with me over the next couple months. And so your feedback is why we're here today. So
it goes for me too. I mean, she and I, or either one of us singly who can meet with individuals or groups, we'll do that with anybody who wants to talk about this issue. The working groups, let me tell you some specifics about the working group. So it's appointed by the president. We've got representatives from SJP, Council Center, REPD, Russell Barnes, who's our Title IX coordinator, is on there. Stacy Mosley, Senior Associate Athletic Director, is a member of the committee. A couple folks from Wellbeing, especially Kate Noonan, is on the committee. Counseling is on the committee. General counsel, lawyers are represented, of course. And Arno Chevalier, who's sort of my counterpart for graduate students, is on the committee as well. So it's a representative body, but the group is only going to work if we get input from students, broadly speaking. So I just do want to reemphasize our willingness to come talk in venues like this or others. And before we go on, because I know I forget how to do it now, we have established an email address for the working group that you all can write to at any time. If you do write to this email, it basically goes into the working group's OwlSpace email archive. So the only people who will see it will be folks on the working group. And we will treat any information that comes to us by this email as for our eyes only. The information collected and made to you. So before I forget, it's Not Alone, WG, so Not Alone, WG, so the working group, sort of a short name, at owlspace.rice. So I encourage you guys to use that. Okay, so a little bit more background. So the working group was appointed in June. One of the motivations for creating the working group was the work of the White House, Department of Justice, Department of Education. Throughout the spring of 2014, the White House produced a report that made quite a few recommendations and some mandates on what colleges and universities should be doing to better address sexual assault, sexual violence, sexual harassment, and to bring policies and practices in line with existing Title IX laws. The major report came out in April, Uh, I'm happy to report that Rice was working on many of the things that the White House recommended in advance of the report. But once that report came out, the HUT, the General Counsel's Office, the President, decided that we should form a working group that would take a close look at all that Rice does, policies, processes, how we communicate about our policies and processes to do with sexual assault and sexual violence. And make sure that we're meeting the guidelines, but even more importantly, that we're creating policies and processes that make this a safe campus, and make it a campus where survivors of sexual violence are willing to come forward and feel safe in coming forward and reporting. So if I don't have to tell all of you, sexual assault is woefully underreported nationwide on college campuses. So one of the principal goals of this movement from the White House and Department of Justice is to help campuses create a more student-friendly and trauma-informed environment so we can actually understand what's happening on our campus and respond to it. So the working group was formed to look at what Rice is doing, try to meet the standard and go beyond the standard for our own community's needs and safety, and eventually make some recommendations to the way that I'm leading the charge. We're supposed to make our recommendations to Dean Hutch, Dean Matsuda, as Dean of Graduate Students, and the President. So we are a recommending body. We are not the body that is writing the policies and procedures, for example. We do have folks on our working group who have the expertise, who do have the responsibility for writing the procedures. But the working group's job is to look at what is going into writing, the practices that we want to put into action, and advise the dean and the president whether they're adequate, and whether they're serving our students' safety and interests as best as possible. So as Megan said, we've met a few times over the summer. We first met in July. We've met twice in August. We've, to date, really just gotten started. We've familiarized ourselves with what the government has recommended and mandated. We have taken a look at the draft sexual assault policy and procedures document that SJP and the General Counsel's Office has been working on all summer. We spent a whole meeting talking about training and education. And that also was somewhat informational, making sure we understood what exactly was going on campus. And then beginning to look at that in comparison to what the government was recommending, and in comparison to what we thought would be ideal for our community. And we've had a couple of subgroup meetings. So the working group urged SJP and the General Counsel, as they were working on the draft policy, to meet with students who were here over the summer. I believe Megan was part of that meeting. And then I had a meeting with RUPD and the General Counsel's Office and SJP, because I want the committee to look at RUPD's investigation procedures and how RUPD interacts with SJP and the General Counsel's Office and the Dean's Office when there are cases of sexual violence that RUPD is. So that's what we've done so far. The areas that we're looking at, based on what the government has told us we should look at, are policies and procedures, training, education, prevention, programs, communication. This is something I think is really important. We've got to do a better job of communicating to the campus what our policies are, what they mean, so that students understand what to expect should they come into the process. I feel like we're doing
Those are big. Just the fact that programming and training are two different entities. So we're not only trying to create programming such as Project Safe and then expand on that to other types of programming that are kind of for students and graduate students. We also are trying to really ramp up the training that faculty and staff have, so that if they are reported to, they feel more equipped to know their role, know what they need to do, understand the processes themselves, and also be more kind of trauma informed, which is kind of the word, just so that everyone on campus, no matter who you go to, should be better informed in the coming years than they have been in the past.
I think something you'll see reflected in the draft is really high sensitivity to what I call the first interactions for survivors. So, if a student is a survivor of sexual assault, who are they going to talk to in that first instance? It can be a variety of people. Right? It could be a college master or RA, it might be the police, they might go directly to SJP. They might, under these new regulations, go to our Title IX coordinators. But in all those cases, what I think we've worked hard at reflecting in the policy is to communicate to students that survivors that come forward are going to come into an environment that's sensitive to their situation, that helps them maintain their choice over what happens next and the kinds of options they pursue, and then responds to their emotional and other needs as a way to accommodate them and help their academic experience here not be impeded by the trauma of assault. So what we've done so far in action, we've looked at the policy draft, we've offered our comments and suggestions. We've talked about training. I think it's fair to say that we've made recommendations on the importance of training for college personnel. We know we need to know more about graduate students' needs when it comes to sexual assault, so we're going to do some investigation there. We've tasked Arnaud Chevalier from Graduate Studies and Kate Noonan from Wellbeing to draw up a flow chart, like a graphic, that students can see and very clearly understand the different reporting options, and where they can go and what sort of options follow if they go to SJP or they go to the police. That'll be part of the policy once it's posted. Am I getting anything? So we do want to give you a preview of the policy and procedures document. It's different than what's been online to date. I think much for the better. It's a very long document. Some for legal reasons, right? There's some things we just have to put in the document that make it a long document. But also because we want to make sure that what we put in writing and communicate to you and that you guys access in times of need is extremely clear about your options, the resources on campus, and what to expect should you enter into the process. Now, I'm talking about a draft. We don't have the full draft to show you yet. The full draft is still being reviewed by President Lebron and the university's attorneys. But Dean Hutch told me yesterday that he expects there to be a full draft available to students within a week. And that'll go up online. You guys will get notification, probably in an email from Hutch and Dean Matsuda, that it's available. Tonight is a way to sort of start getting a sense of what it contains. Megan can give you a really good sense of, I think, some of the key areas. And we want to take your questions, obviously, on what you see. But what I really want you to keep in mind is it's a draft. And even what you will get in a week is really a working draft. The university has to have a policy. We've got to have procedures. And we want to have the best policy and procedures up and in operation and in effect as soon as possible. So when you do get it in a week and it goes posted, it will be the policy and procedures under which we will operate this semester. But this is also going to be a multi-week and month process where we're taking your feedback on the policy and procedures. The government has told us that they're going to issue a new set of guidelines, including language on policy, training recommendations, and the like. That's coming in September and October. So there's going to be more things that we have to adjust to. So keep in mind that even though what you'll see tonight and what you'll receive in a week and what goes up online is in many ways, it's a polished, I think, very, very good document. I'm just, for Matt Taylor, who's been doing this stuff for a long time, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's come a long way over the summer. But that doesn't mean we can't make it better. And we can especially make it better, I think, if students get vested in helping us understand what it communicates to you, what you think is missing, and what should be included to make it an effective policy for the community. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the real questions that we're gonna have, and we need just as many eyes on it as possible to answer, is just the readability, the understandability, because the question isn't, should we put in the policy that we have Title IX coordinators and these are who they are? No, that's gonna be in the policy, but if there are aspects that are confusing, that are unclear, that need either more elaboration or there's too much elaboration or aren't included, that's really what we need to know. And as many student eyes on it as possible is the only way to really know that best we can. So.
take it away.
Yeah, so just really quickly, this is the outline of the draft that we have. So it goes over definitions of consent, it goes over definitions of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and it talks about situations in which consent is not present specifically, which we thought was really important just to kind of have an expanded definition of consent in that way. It talks about what Title IX is, who the coordinators are, what an investigation entails. It talks about resources very specifically. I know some of you might have been at Project SAFE, might have had that little card. It's basically an extremely detailed version of kind of that card, and it spells out, okay, this person is reporting, non-reporting, you know, here's what launches this kind of investigation, here's what doesn't. It talks about what your options, pretty clearly. It talks about different types of investigations, like I said, and then it talks about kind of SJP's role. Basically, the sexual assault policy, SJP is going to insert into the student code of conduct, in addition to having it available as kind of its own separate working document. So this will be part of the student code of conduct that everyone has to sign and agree to every year, just because that makes sense. It's the university policy about how students conduct themselves. It should be in the code of conduct. So, and then it doesn't talk a whole lot about training, prevention, education efforts, just because that's one of the areas where we're very much kind of open to expanding and going forward and growing. So yeah, it's going to say what consent is, and like I said, when consent is not present. So it talks specifically about alcohol, what that means, unconsciousness. It talks about once you consent doesn't mean you're always consenting. It talks about just because you consent to one person doesn't mean you consent to everyone. It talks about coercion, and it talks about the fact that consent can always be withdrawn.
This is a significant addition to what we had online, because we didn't have anything like this.
Yeah. The whole, I think one of the main points of this document also is just so that people, if people have experienced sexual assault and they have gone to no one, I think that this document is a lot more empowering than the current thing that's online, which is basically a list of resources. It's very easy, I think, to look at this document by yourself and understand this was a sexual assault that happened to me, here's what I can do about it, versus, hey, go talk to somebody about it. Because we also want to be able to say, okay, if a person is not in a place where they want to talk to anyone about it, we want to also give them this as a resource to use to understand what's happening. So that's part of the rationale behind this. So yeah, and it specifically talks about that if you sexually assault someone, it violates the code of conduct, which is pretty straightforward. Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, it defines specifically sexual assault, and it is very clear about the different kind of classifications of sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and how everything is under the sexual misconduct umbrella.
You know, one thing Patrick would want to say if he were here is that the university takes sexual assault extremely seriously. Right? Now, sometimes you'll hear the word sexual misconduct used as sort of an umbrella term, and that can give a wrong impression, right? That an assault is just misconduct. That we want to make sure that students understand that sexual assault will be taken very seriously in our adjudication process and how we respond. But the law requires a broader definition of what is unacceptable sexual interaction than the term sexual assault allows. And so just don't be confused by the two. The policy includes them both, but the intention is twofold. First, to just make sure that students understand that there are a wide range of behaviors that we think violate our code of conduct. But then it's extremely important to know that students found responsible for sexual assault will meet the most serious consequences from the dean's office and SJP.
Yeah, awesome. So you can move on. Yeah, it basically talks about sexual misconduct as the umbrella term. This is also kind of pretty straightforward, but the fact that it's included, we thought it made, like Dean Taylor said, the wording more clear. So it talks about sexual harassment, and you guys probably got the email about the sexual harassment training. So that's always been the training that staff has received, and potentially faculty, graduate students, yeah. So just since we had that training already, the idea was to just start the process of just trying to get people thinking about these issues as much as possible and a little bit more informed. So, yeah, you can move on. Yeah, and it talks about relationship violence, and it says explicitly when it talks about these things that relationship violence does not have to be of a sexual nature, which I think is important. So someone can be stalking you, and there can be no real sexual element in that, but it's still, we fall under this policy, and so it makes that very clear, and it addresses kind of all of these different situations, and we made sure to make it clear that these things can happen in any kind of type of relationship. That was something that wasn't necessarily clear before. That actually, when we met with Robbie and Andrew and a couple of students, we thought it was really important to say that you don't have to be dating to have dating violence, and you don't have to be in a relationship to have relationship violence, and that it can happen no matter who your partner is, and even if they're not your partner, it can fall under this. So that's this section. It goes very specifically into confidential versus responsible employees, which I think is probably the most difficult part of the policy to understand, and the thing that's most new to the discussion on Rice campus. So this is, if you're only going to read one part of the policy to see if you understand it, this is the part that I would prefer that you would read, just because I think this is very important that we get right in our communication. Because confidential versus responsible employees, having most employees be responsible, not confidential employees, is how it has to be. So that's kind of what has come down from the government, that we need to designate specific confidential employees, and that anyone we don't designate is a responsible employee, but I just want to make sure that people know exactly what that means.
So it means in our policy that students can go to the licensed folks in the counseling center, the doctors in the health center, and they can keep their report totally confidential. They have
don't
no
set any wheels.
They don't have to report to anyone. All other employees are considered responsible employees. So if any of y'all came to me, or if you went to your college master, both of us would be required to report that we know of a sexual assault on campus. We have to report that to one of the Title IX people, coordinator. Now, what's very important to point out, again, this is why it's important to read the policy. My telling the Title IX coordinator that a student came to me and reported a sexual assault doesn't set the wheels in motion of an SJP investigation or case, an RUPD investigation or case. All it does is it means that we've done our legal duty to inform our Title IX coordinator. And the Title IX coordinator then would follow up with the student to But the Title IX coordinator, in almost every case, is not required to divulge that student's name if the student doesn't want it divulged. It's not required to go to SJP to start a case. Now, they are required to do what's called a Title IX investigation, but that still can maintain the student's confidentiality if the student requests it. Unless it's a case that suggests there's a larger danger to the community. And then we're legally obligated to take some additional action. But it's, like Megan said, it's really, really important that students understand who they can talk to confidentially, but also understand that when you talk to a responsible employee, you're not opening up the details of the case and your name to anyone other than a very, very small circle of people.
Yeah, and the policy, we're lucky because if we had just kind of started thinking about sexual assault on racist campus in June, this policy wouldn't be what it is. So Hawk is specifically mentioned in our policy because we have a standing official relationship with them, which we started, I think, 2 years ago on official capacity, but it's mentioned specifically in the policy. If you don't want to get involved with Rice at all, you can go to Hawk, and it says exactly what they are. They're a 24-hour resource. Yes, they do hospital.
So I know one element of the campus-wide discussion that I've heard so far is you guys do mention Hawk, but some people feel that a resource that needs to be mentioned is like HPD to avoid the perception of kind of keeping it internal to the community. Does that play into your policy at all? Is there a reason that it is not in there?
So it is in there,
Okay.
and I think there's one misconception among students if the editorial on the Thresher represents student opinion. Right, the Thresher editorial said that Rice doesn't make use of the police, doesn't refer students to the police. That's just not right. In every case that comes to our attention, we interact with the police. Now, the university cannot go to the district attorney and say, take this case. Right? We have this case on campus. We think you should pursue and prosecute this case. We can't do that. The student has to make her own decision to take it to the DA before the DA will move. But what we do in every case is we'll say to the student, hey, you can pursue this many ways. If you pursue it on campus, you can also pursue it with the district attorney and the police. We also go to the district attorney and say, hey, here's sort of the facts of this case. Can you tell us does this look like a case you would pursue? And that way we're better informed and we can say to the student, hey, we think this is a case we think the DA would take if you want to take that option. So I hope that helps. But to the point of RUPD specifically, so RUPD is also a great resource. Their officers are all specially trained to deal with these issues. If, say there was an incident in one of the colleges and the survivor or friend calls RUPD and EMS and they show up on the scene, RUPD is not mandated to do anything other than report to Title IX. Right? So reporting to RUPD does not automatically kick in an SJP case.
If someone makes a report to HPD, will HPD conduct and asks HPD to investigate?
Yeah.
Will HPD investigate, or will they refer that back to RUPD?
I don't know.
Because like if you get a noise complaint called into HPD from off campus, a lot of times HPD will just call RUPD and not want to deal with it themselves. So I think it's important for students to understand whether if they for whatever reason don't want RUPD to be involved, whether HPD is actually a resource for them other than as a referral to RUPD.
Is that hard to, I mean, is that very internal to HPD though? Like, do we have influence over that?
I mean, I think we could ask HPD how they would handle it.
Yeah, just inform students of how it might happen.
Yeah.
But might a Title IX investigation involve if it doesn't include RUPD or SJP?
Right, good question. So, my understanding, kind of in advance for, I'm going to put some of that in, keep going. Let's look.
I mean, mean, from my understanding, talking to the Title IX coordinators, it's things like basically university accommodations.
Yeah.
So
That's the
they can
students.
get your class changed, they can get your room changed, they can change around things in your life to make, basically Title IX has to do with educational experiences of students. So Title IX priorities are make sure that if you want to, you can continue your education at Rice while your alleged perpetrator is also at Rice in the way that's best for your educational environment. So I think that could vary based on what you wanted done. But that's how it's been explained to me.
Quoting from the draft, once Rice attends to the immediate needs of the student, it then assesses the situation, including determining the reporting student's further needs and wishes. This response may also be referred to as the Title IX investigation. It's separate from SGP or law enforcement. It's an opportunity to assess what else might be done to help the survivor and to protect the community. This can usually take place without disclosure of reporting students' information if that's what the student wishes. The only thing I would add is that the Title IX coordinator is the person who determines whether it's a case that requires additional action, right? If it's one that can't be kept confidential, that's determined by the Title IX. After talking with the student, and the Title IX coordinator will confer with other people on campus, but that's one of their roles.
And could he choose to take it elsewhere without the student's consent?
Only if it's one of these cases that the Title IX coordinator determines involves the safety of the campus. Doing nothing would further jeopardize the safety of the campus.
So it's subjective to whoever is the Title IX coordinator.
I'm not sure I'd go that far, but I think the Title IX coordinator, it's going to be no Title IX coordinator here is going to make that decision without consent.
There was a big editorial in the Harvard Crimson, maybe in the spring, about a student who had suffered from sexual assault and took it to the administration. You might be aware of this. And the student who was the perpetrator wasn't moved to a different residential college, and instead they suggested that the victim be moved. Do you know? This might be a question for a Title IX coordinator, but do you know how that would work here?
So my understanding is that the new government guidelines give the Title IX coordinator the authority to make accommodations for the survivor without reference to other processes. So for example, if the survivor wanted to transfer colleges, you all probably know we have a process for transferring colleges. The student has to talk to their master and the master of the other college. If they both agree, then those masters go to the committee of masters, and the committee of masters has to say yes or no. But now, if it's a Title IX case, the Title IX coordinator can say to another college, you need to make room for this. They can do the same thing with some academic accommodations as well. For example, without going to the registrar or without going to EXMS.
I have a question that's kind of a little different from this, but I'm not totally aware of the bits of the policy itself. But I think I see a lot of these things are at the university level, and that being Rice, is there anything, not necessarily in the policy, but more sort of resources at the college level, other than RHA or something?
Yeah, so one thing that we want to make really clear to people is that nobody at the college level is going to be a confidential employee, right?
And I think the point there is that the reason people at the college level are confidential employees, and this is just, I don't know if this is completely the entire story, but it's unreasonable to expect, a master in RHA, or a master in RHA, and RA to know how to deal with these types of issues, be trained in how to deal with these issues, and also deal with the mental side effects of having to work. They're not trained to deal with this, and so the only reason that only licensed medical professionals are able to do it is exactly for that reason, because they have in-depth training, they have in-depth knowledge on how to do it, and it's just not feasible to have those people at the college level.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I agree with that. I understand that you can't have a you know, be a non-disclosing employee or whatever sorts, but at the same time, because there's a sense of familiarity there, I'm not saying necessarily that we need to have RAs and masters be provided, but more so having resources very present at the college level, just because I think it's hard to do that jump from being here and then going straight to the university level.
So two things come to mind. One is we want students to feel like they can go to their masters in RAs and RHAs. And we're going to train them to be as equipped as possible to still have those conversations in a way that is sensitive, but also to where they can help you understand what the next steps are. But one of our conversations that we had about training and education was boosting the training for RHAs, caregivers, servers, and others in the college, so that not that they're the person that you would go to, like serve, right, but so that they have a better awareness of issues related to sexual assault, so they can intervene more readily, be a more positive influence in the college life.
Yeah, I think we are just trying to figure out ways with the help of students to take existing structures that are already a part of RICE, like caregiver training, like discussions about the culture of care, like the college personnel teams, and just make sure that those include a discussion about sexual assault and like a healthy sexual environment, and also make sure that college teams feel confident about their response. I'll take Brian, and then I'm going to go to the confidential question.
Okay. It was mentioned earlier that the Title IX coordinator is able to transfer the survivor to another college. Is the Title IX coordinator able to move the accused student off campus, or otherwise make accommodations that involve changes in the accused student's life rather than just the survivor? Can they interim investigate the accused student?
They do have authority for interim accommodations, so even while the process is being worked out.
But with that comes kind of this great area where if you want someone to be moved off campus, they have to be aware that they are at least being accused of something, or that some wheels are turning, right? You can't just, the Title IX coordinator couldn't just go up to you and be like, sorry,
So
moved off campus.
if you didn't want to report in a judicial sense, then those options wouldn't be available.
They would be available, but if you said, I don't want this person to know that I remember anything, I don't want this person to have any idea that anything is happening on my end, you can't realistically get those accommodations. But as far as I understand, you can get those accommodations without starting any kind of judicial process.
Okay.
So it's like the middle ground between nothing and starting a judicial process where the person knows something has happened, but you're not actually pressing any charges. I'm going to go to the confidential questions really quick because they're pretty easy to kind of go. So one question, is the university going to wait to make the new policy official until the working group has completed its investigation? No. The new policy is it's already being utilized really as a framework by SJP and other people who need to utilize it. But it will go into effect even while it's in draft form. What kind of power does the working group have to make changes to the policy? Some aspects of the policy are mandated by the government. Some aspects of the policy are mandated by the university. But we do have the power to make our opinion about the policy known, and we have changed a lot of the wording already. So we do have leeway on a lot of aspects of the policy, particularly how it's worded and what it's communicating. Less so do we have power to say, you know what I mean, scratch out this whole section about, HAWK, we don't need that. Like, certain things are gonna stay in there. So, HAWK is specifically mentioned in the policy. Are there any resources mentioned to protect male or male identifying victims who may, and then it gets cut off. HAWK does help male victims, but I think we could be more upfront about that in the policy. Everything in the policy is we've gone through and made sure that it says male or female, and their attacker is male or female. It just says any attacker, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that question, I just didn't want to interrupt. I'm just worried that even if HAWK does provide resources for male identifying victims, a male identifying victim doesn't always want to go to something labeled as a women's center.
Right.
So maybe think about putting something in the adding another resource that does specifically help male victims.
Yeah. I don't know that we currently have a relationship as Rice with a peer institution to Hawk that is not called a women's center. But I agree with you that we can make it more explicit and we can bring that up as to like, are there avenues we haven't thought of in terms of off-campus resources? Because it doesn't hurt to just say this is also an off-campus resource. Like we don't have to hire anybody to do that. You know what I mean? It's pretty easy to say this is also a resource. But new policy document, measures for perpetrators. What measures we taken to prevent perpetrators? This question got cut off too. Prevent perpetrators. Okay. So how the new policy document addresses measures for perpetrators. So basically, in the policy, if you are launching an investigation, the person is referred to as an alleged perpetrator because basically SJP and anyone who is handling the case is not going to presume that the person is guilty. And they're actually going to offer basically the same resources to an alleged perpetrator as a survivor. So if you are allowed to have someone in the room with you, an alleged perpetrator is also allowed to have someone in the room with them. The policy is meant to be as equitable as possible to the alleged perpetrator, basically in case of a situation where, you know what I mean, that perpetrator, we don't want that perpetrator's rights to be violated at all in the process.
Sorry, that was my question, and it got cut off, but the other part to that question, actually, I'm more interested in what's talked about in the policy in terms of prevention. There's a lot of like what's being done on the end of reporting, what happens when sexual assault does happen, but what about sort of creating a better culture where, you know, rape doesn't happen so much? What's being done on that end?
The way I would hear that as chair of the working group is as sort of a recommendation to us to give more attention to that issue, right? And to look at, so what is the campus doing on the question of prevention? What sort of programs do we have? What are peers doing, peer institutions doing that we can learn from? And just getting more information for students to bring it to the attention of the working group. You know, one of the things that Megan and I want to walk away with tonight and from other interactions with students, we want to know what your priorities are. You know, we know what the government has told us we're supposed to be looking at. We have folks on the committee who think they have some ideas of our priorities, but you know, we really need to know from students. And so, you know, questions like yours help point us in your direction.
Yeah, I think just in terms of prevention and culture specifically, I don't really think that culture can be achieved by prescribing a culture in this document, but I think the existence of the document and the process that we're going about to create the document is like one of the first steps to creating a better culture. But I think most of the work in terms of culture, in terms of prevention, has to be done by attacking this issue basically from all angles, right? It shouldn't be just an O-week thing, it should be a year-round thing. It shouldn't be just an undergrad thing, it should be a graduate student thing. We should make use of all the student groups that we can. So, I mean, basically, we're looking at, right now, what we've looked at is what are we doing in terms of prevention? What we're going to be looking at over the next couple of months is what should we be doing? So if you have opinions about what should we be doing, if you have ideas, if you want to get involved in that, this is kind of like our call to you, like, yes, please help us figure out what we need to be doing in terms of prevention. We're trying to look at peer institutions and what they do. Honestly, a lot of peer institutions aren't doing a whole lot, and if they are, it's not in the scale that it's being presented online in a very kind of fashion where I can go find it and say, yeah, we need to do this program. I mean, I just haven't found a whole lot in that vein, but really quickly, I'm going to answer a couple of these because I think they're important. Do work-study students count as responsible employees? No, students are not responsible employees at all. Clear actions and words are needed. What does that mean? It's very vague in terms of the definition of consent. I think by definition, the definition of consent is going to be a little bit vague. We tried to make it as specific as possible by saying actions and words, not actions or words. That was an important designation for us, but we can, I mean, if,
Look at how other schools.
yeah, I mean, we're gonna continue to kind of look at that, but the consent for someone who's never been your partner versus someone who's been your partner for 5 years, that's something that people are concerned about, right? So that is, I hear you on that, but that's also just something that we're looking at. Can we do a program where confidential employees become more present? So just because you're a confidential employee, like a counselor, does not mean that if I find a counselor at an event, that they're a responsible employee. They're only a responsible employee, or confidential, they're only a confidential employee if they're in a treating relationship with you. So you can't just go to their house at night and be like, I have to tell you this, you're the only confidential employee. You have to kind of say in a treating relationship, but I agree that people from the counseling center and people from health services, to kind of break down barriers that are perceived there, should be more out in the student body, and that's also something we're trying to do with SJP, trying to get SJP also to have faces and not be an entity. And then, what protection do accused persons have? How can a Title IX coordinator investigate someone without performing an SJP investigation? That would be in the case of like an interim solution, and that, I mean, honestly, Russell Barnes and the other Title IX coordinators, we don't get to really prescribe in the policy the powers that they are given by virtue of being a Title IX coordinator. That's coming down pretty directly from the government, as I understand it, and from the university. That's not really something within our scope, I guess. Are you cutting off?
Yeah, I think at this point we're a little bit over time, but what I propose is that we can end the meeting now, and I guess anybody who wants to continue to talk, ask questions, maybe we can just stick around. I'm free for the next, So, hopefully it's not going to get to that point, but I think, we can all, if you don't have any questions, you can head out, but if not, we can kind of continue this discussion for those who are interested. Obviously, this is a huge priority, not only just for myself, the SA, but I think kind of everyone across campus, all the student leaders, and so really it's important if you have thoughts, if you have just, questions, reach out to the people you would like to talk to them, send me an email, send your college president an email. We're really your advocates here. There's a lot of opportunity for you to really get your input, get your voice heard, and really impact the policy that we're making and the community standards that we're going to abide by. So don't be afraid to kind of join this process, be a part of it. But with that in mind, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion. Second. All right, this meeting is over. We can kind of wait a couple